right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Technology Acceleration Podcast. And I'm super excited to have a guest here with me that I've known for a while, Bart Giordano. And I'll give a quick bio on Bart, and then I'll let him give a quick introduction too. But Bart is the Senior Vice President of the Networking, Intelligent Cellular, and Security Solutions business at Commscope. And he's responsible for the development, growth, and transportation of Commscope's enterprise networking, wireless mobility, and security portfolio aligned to Commscope's strategic transformation initiative. And before Commscope, Bart was general manager of the Ruckus business unit and previously led the worldwide sales organization. And he has a 20-year career across a bunch of different technology and business roles across networking, wireless, cloud. Before Ruckus, Bart actually worked at Ignite, which is an enterprise SaaS company that I was an advisor to going back a long time ago, how I got to know Bart, and Marvel Semiconductor. So, man, semiconductors to cloud to networking. And before that, was even a software engineer at Cisco as well. So, Bart, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks so much for having me, Bryan. Really excited to be part of this with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the goal of this podcast, Bart, is we talk all about how organizations of all shapes and sizes are using technology to grow their business. And so, pretty much most of the folks listening and most of the folks on are techies, as you are. And I would
Yeah.
love to just get, your career in a nutshell or your resume in a nutshell and what led you to technology and got you to where you are today.
Yeah. So I think growing up, I was always strong in math and science in school and kind of envisioned myself in an engineering career. And another thing I was always very passionate about was aviation. And so I kind of put those two together when I was thinking about where I wanted to start my university career. And I thought aerospace engineering, that's a good fit for me. And started off in university at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo in the aeronautical engineering program. And out of the gate, it was a 5 year program. And I started looking at the 5th year curriculum and quickly decided that I was not on a trajectory where I thought I was going to successfully negotiate advanced aerothermodynamics. But as part of that curriculum, I had to take a Fortran programming class, and I caught the bug. I just fell in love with programming. So I kind of half joke with
Fortran made you
everybody.
fall in love with programming. That is a first.
It did. And I pivoted to computer engineering, so kind of took the easy way out. Sometimes I lament that because I think working at SpaceX would be pretty cool. But that led me to a software engineering career early on at Cisco, as you referenced. In fact, I had an opportunity to work professionally while in university and was always like really intrigued by embedded systems. I'd grown up tinkering with electronics and those kind of things. And I guess shortly into my career as a software engineer, I got more experience working with product managers, and I got a lot more curious about the front end of businesses. And so I was kind of looking around for ways to get closer to the customer as I thought about product development. Led me to a product management role at Marvell. Spent many successful years there. It's where I cut my teeth in wireless and connectivity. And after almost 8 years at Marvell, I kind of looked around Silicon Valley here where I live and thought, this whole cloud and SaaS thing seems pretty important. I better go figure that out. Maybe I'll try my hat at a startup, which is how I ended up at Ignite. And following that, I started at Ruckus Networks and have essentially been in that business for 10 years. We've had a lot of changes along the way, multiple acquisitions. So now I lead a division of Commscope, but I'm still very deeply involved as the general manager day to day for the Ruckus business. And so always been enthused by tech. And I think now we are entering a period with like the highest pace of change I've ever seen in the industry. So we've gone through a lot of different waves of innovation and change, but boy, the period we're in now is really incredible, and it's a lot of fun to be in and around.
Yeah, I agree. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I've been in tech since the 90s and the dot-com thing, but boy, I have never seen anything like this. But I like your background as a technologist first. So I want to dive a little deeper on this because I think we share this that I was a tinkerer, nerd kid, worked at Radio Shack in high school. I was all about going to become an engineer of some type and started working at Sprint doing, literally in the central offices doing networking, in those small little bomb shelter buildings, and
Yeah.
suddenly realized I don't know if I can do this for 40 years. Like I need to talk to other humans, and do other things like that. So anyway, I'm curious, like as you moved into sales, did you see like do you think having a technology background, has helped other salespeople? Like, do you think that's an important aspect that you see in people that go into, more like revenue generating careers, whether it's product
Yeah.
management, sales,
I
does
think
that?
if you're selling technology, it really helps to connect with your customer. Your customer's a high-tech buyer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And obviously they're looking for the value that your solution and the way you partner with them and the way your organization is able to innovate, what value is that going to bring to their business? So I certainly think it helps to have a firm foundation in tech. Some of the best salespeople I know have no technology background whatsoever. They're just really astute at driving a sales campaign and building relationships with customers. But for me personally, I kind of fell into sales. I half joke with everybody. I had done business development jobs and I'd run channel sales for a while at Ignite, but I'd never, carried a bag my whole career. And so I kind of joke with people that my first real sales job was head of worldwide sales for Ruckus. And while I never fancied myself as building a career in sales, that was a really important period of my career and a really important step on the arc of my journey. As a general manager, I think it's very beneficial having been an engineer, having worked in product management, been very close to product development, and then being able to connect that to a go-to-market strategy and kind of bring it all together. Of course, with supply chain and customer support in the general management role. So I think if you work in the high tech industry in any capacity, obviously being passionate about technology and having a firm, solid foundational background there certainly helped me, and I think it does help salespeople who are on the front lines to be able to connect with their customers at that level.
Yeah, yeah, same. I fell into sales. I'm a probably terrible salesperson, so I really needed that technology background because that was the only way I was getting in any of these
That's what you
doors.
lean on.
Yeah, 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 exactly. So I can talk about all the gadgets and gizmos, but that's how, yeah, that was the same way for me. So, I'd be curious too, Bart, to get your view on, I'm fascinated, honestly, by the new important role of the network right now in this era.
Yeah.
If we're honest, I feel like there was this weird period where networking was almost an afterthought, or some people said it was commoditized. But now I feel like we're moving into this new era of an empowered workforce with AI and others. And I'm curious how your customers are now looking at the network as like a really mission critical component of this new era that we're entering into. Maybe you can expand on that. What are you hearing from your customers when you
Yeah, I
go out and
would
talk to
I
them?
would agree with that. I think that there was a time when networking was like the sexiest thing going on in our industry,
Cisco
and
is like
and
the
every
most valuable company in the world for a while there, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, certainly when I worked there way back when, and we've gone through different hype cycles and different periods of innovation, and I'd say, if you're coming into technology today, you want to work in AI or you want to work in cyber, but at the end of the day, fundamentally, the network is the platform across and on which all those things are built, right? All the modern applications, the way you're transporting all of the data in and out of a data center for different AI driven applications. And so it is maybe emerging as a bit of a utility in some extent. To some extent, we often talk about like Wi-Fi, which has become absolutely ubiquitous in our lives that we almost take it for granted. it's like the fourth utility. When you go and survey students in a residence hall, for example, they'll rather give up the hot water than give up the Wi-Fi, right? And so I think it is recognized as mission critical, and really that platform from which all other innovation today is built on because of the way our lives are ubiquitously connected.
Yeah, I think it's the air we breathe in many ways is Wi-Fi and just the network more broadly. I mean, because without it and without it functioning well, I mean, nothing else matters. Everything else breaks. I
That's
mean,
right.
really quickly. So, when you look at your global business, Bart, I'd be curious too. Like, are you seeing any patterns emerge where there's any specific industries or maybe even geographies that seem to be moving a little quicker or a little more excited? Are you seeing the market bifurcate in any ways right now?
Yeah, certainly. I would say that coming out of the COVID era, which we all know and loved, the era of sort of remote and hybrid work has changed the traditional carpeted enterprise. I think if you have, I was talking to an analyst earlier today, uh, that something like 50% of commercial space is not occupied. And so, in a traditional carpeted enterprise, if you have less than 50% of your employees coming in to work on a day to day basis, your top initiative is probably not upgrading the enterprise network, at least from an access perspective, in order to enable those employees to be more productive. So, where we see a lot of growth are in sectors that are still undergoing digital transformation. Education's a great one, right? If you are trying to digitally transform your school and drive a student outcome, the network again is the platform on which you build that initiative. Similarly, there's a lot of industries that you would historically consider low tech, take manufacturing, warehousing, logistics, that are now trying to leverage things like robotics and remote scanning technologies and anything they can do to drive more throughput through their factory or warehouse. And the platform for innovation that they build those applications on is, of course, the network. So we certainly see a bit of a bifurcation where the traditional carpeted enterprise is probably not putting as much emphasis on the quality of the network, certainly in those industries that value remote work and have a hybrid workforce, whereas there are other industries that need to continue to innovate to drive a business outcome. And the platform is an essential element of that strategy.
Yeah, yeah, I see that. I see very similar things in the customers that we're working with, and I'm glad you mentioned the manufacturing one because we are seeing this really explosion in demand for AI at the edge, and in manufacturing for things like, I mean, wide-ranging use cases from quality assurance to worker safety to robotics that are really need really low latency and a lot of location data. And I will tell you, the thing that slows our work down the most is not having the right network in place.
Right.
It's funny. It's like it all goes back to the network. So I'd be curious, like when you talk to these, let's say like a manufacturing company, right? Like, are you seeing those use cases too, where they're thinking about AI and how to use AI, and now that's driving conversations with you and your teams on, okay, well, we need to start at the base layer. We need to get the building blocks in place with the network first before we think about
Yeah.
these next gen use cases.
Well, I think you touched on something very important. For the last several decades, we've been migrating every workload we could think of to the cloud, right? But we touched on Ignite already. What I learned at Ignite was fundamentally the world is hybrid, and you want to be deploying workloads where they make the most sense because you have security compliances you're obligated to meet, because you have latency and performance requirements, because you have mission critical applications that still need to function in the event of a network outage. And so thinking through that and applying that to a manufacturing environment, right? All of those would apply in those environments, and so the network is critical in order to enable them to take the next step and apply AI technology, to apply a lot of mobility, whether that is an automated guided vehicle, whether that is robotics, or even barcode scanners, right, in a warehouse. And so what they find oftentimes is when they want to go employ these technologies, particularly in a factory setting or a warehouse setting where you have a very complex RF environment, incredibly dynamic, that they go to deploy these technologies and they find that, I can't get it to work effectively. And in fact, I've taken a step back because I didn't put the foundation in place. I didn't build out my network infrastructure, wired or wireless, in a way that would allow me to realize the promise of all these newfound technologies.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. We see it too. I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking through a project that I did a while back with a large hospital system, a university hospital system. And you mentioned that word mobility. And that was the thing that was eye-opening to me of how many devices in a healthcare setting are truly mobile. X-rays now are mobile. They'll bring it to you. The doctors, right? They have carts and laptops moving everywhere. And they made a great point, Bart, that I think you hit on, that for them, like there can be no downtime. Like there are certain workloads have to run physically at the hospital because not having them there is life or death, literally, right? So like being a cloud guy, fully recognize that there
Yeah.
are certain things that you'll always put on premises, right? And
Well,
it
and
just
healthcare too is highly regulated, right? So you
absolutely,
get
yeah.
into a lot of HIPAA concerns with cloud-based applications, and then many of the health monitoring devices now operate over Wi-Fi because they want to be mobile and they want to be able to reconfigure an operating room or patient care in a way that enables that flexibility. But imagine, right, if you don't have a robust Wi-Fi network, you are talking about life and death, right? Because this is mission critical health monitoring equipment that is responsible for maintaining a patient's life.
Yeah, yeah. It's always fascinating in healthcare when you are truly dealing with life and death. It really changes the importance of the work, right? You realize, like, man, this can't go down. This has to work all the time. It's a
Meanwhile,
different.
hospitals are an incredibly complex environment, right? Lots of unique devices that come into the hospital.
Has to be
Many
RF challenged, I would think, too.
Yeah. Well, the many hospitals I go into, they like have underground bunkers, right? It's all got these windowless basements. And so you don't have very strong cellular connectivity. So you really do need to think about the quality of your local network, because in that case, you're trying to drive a positive patient out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious, Bart, when you think back to all of the projects that you've worked on in the past few years, I always like to get insight into like what was the one that just you were like most excited about? You thought like, oh
Yeah.
man, we're really doing something really cool here, and wouldn't it be great if everyone else saw this and kind of
Yeah.
modeled it? What story would you give?
I think what has been remarkable over the arc of my career, spending most of my time in the realm of connectivity, has been the incredible economic and social impact that connectivity has brought to parts of the world that we take it for granted in our lives, right? Whether we're at work, at home, on the road, you're seamlessly connected to all the world's information, any application you like in the palm of your hand. And sometimes it's easy to forget there are a lot of places in the world that don't enjoy that. So I think for me, the most satisfying projects we've worked on is when we've brought connectivity to a part of the world that has never experienced it before, and then watched the benefit of that and the socioeconomic impact of that. One project that comes to mind, in fact, we worked on this with Google many years ago, was bringing connectivity to transit stations in India, right? And a lot of people don't know that there's a service provider in India called Railtel, and the way they became a service provider is when they were laying all this rail across the vast expanses of India, they laid fiber along the tracks. And so essentially, every stop on the track became a point of presence. And by putting Wi-Fi in the front hall, even like in the most remote villages of India, you would see some really incredible impact to the citizens there. People that don't enjoy the freedom of access to broadband technology, where families would come down to the train station on a Friday night, download movies to their local device because they had this high quality internet connection at the train station, then go home and have family movie night. And there's dozens of examples like that. And now we're seeing it with Starlink, right? So even in the example that I referenced, you were still bound to kind of where the railway was taking people, and where you had a point of presence along those tracks. Now you can put a high quality internet connection literally at any longitude and latitude on Earth, and you can do it very, very cost effectively. And in the most remote places in Africa, in Antarctica, in the most rural places in the world, we're bringing seamless connectivity, and it has a dramatic impact to the local economy, and a societal impact to the citizens there in terms of our ability to connect them to the rest of the world and connect them to their community.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that. And you're right. We absolutely take it for granted. And when you were telling that story, I thought back to one that I lived during COVID. We were working with Tractor Supply Company at the time, and they were a customer of ours at VMware. And they had a really innovative, leader there. He's still there, but he came to us and he said, we've got this weird thing happening. Our stores are often in very rural areas, oftentimes where there is no broadband in home. We serve some counties where something like 80% of the homes don't have internet, and
Yeah,
all the kids are at home trying to learn. And he said, we've got this thing now where there are literally kids that are coming into our parking lot with like their Chromebooks trying to do homework on our
yeah,
Wi-Fi, and it's overwhelming some of Wi-Fi in some of
yeah,
these stores, but they weren't shunning it. They wanted to embrace it. Like, they came to us and
yeah,
like, how can we help? How can we help these kids and these families? And can you help us expand our, Wi-Fi into our parking
yeah.
lots? Because you're right. I mean, even in America, I think we take for granted that there are students right now today who don't have internet at home, in a world where school is increasingly moving towards being totally internet based, right?
And that I think COVID and the whole remote learning experience that our children went through exposed a lot of that. Similarly, we were very active during that period. Obviously, there was a lot of federal funding coming in order to address the situation where you sent kids home to remote and distance learn, and they had no better than a 3G connection on a legacy mobile device. And we went to places like Hidalgo County in Texas. These border communities, where they're already underserved, and now you've just disadvantaged the children there because you've put them into this distance learning situation without any reliable connectivity. And by deploying outdoor connectivity along these border communities, we were able to bring really rich connectivity and allow those children to continue to learn. Even putting Wi-Fi on school buses, and they park a school bus in a parking lot, and then everybody would come to the parking
It's
lot during
awesome.
the day. Of course, you can't get out of your car because you got to remain at a safe distance, but you can still be connected, and you can still learn. Now, looking at my own kids' experience distance learning, I'm not so sure all of them were totally engaged, but it provided the opportunity, certainly.
Yeah, no, that's a cool use case. I mean, that's being scrappy. I like that. I like those stories of being scrappy to solve problems. That's
You bet.
definitely what you were doing. No, that's great. Well, maybe shifting gears a little bit, Bart, to kind of like where we're at now. And I'm sure all of our customers, right, are all talking about AI. Everything is AI driven right now, it seems like. And, as you think about this new era of the AI driven enterprise, how are they how are they moving towards real world use cases that give real benefits, that are driving to bottom line, and not just hype, like, oh, we launched a chatbot, or something, it may or may not work.
Right.
How are these AI driven enterprises actually succeeding with AI that you've seen? What are some examples?
Well, I was told earlier this week that we are at the peak of inflated expectations in terms of the hype cycle, and I,
Probably
I would
true.
tend
Yeah.
to I would tend to agree with that, because I think the investment that's gone into AI and the fact that it literally is the top initiative for every CIO and every organization. Like, there's no AI company and not AI company. If you're not an AI company, you're not going to survive, right? So everybody has an interest. Everybody is figuring out how they can participate, and how can it improve their business and their operational efficiency. We've been on this journey as a business in my own business for a couple of years now. And I think our journey started off a lot like many others, where, how can I make an individual more productive, a content creator, for example? Um, and, we're beginning to evolve where we're deriving some real legitimate value across all facets of our business. I think, like in many high tech businesses, my highest spend every year is in R&D and in sales and marketing. And so we started out to think, how can we make all of our engineers and all of our salespeople and our marketers more productive using generative AI and using these new tools? So I think it's pretty straightforward in R&D, particularly a heavily software driven business like ours, where you're using these modern tools in order to improve the effectiveness of your engineers, right? Helping them to automate code. We're using AI today in order to do software quality assurance, right? Where we can leverage AI in order to tell us, how to do regression testing based on, the code changes that came in the night before, and where's the most risk in our code base that we need to exercise. I think it's been maybe a little less straightforward in sales, but we've made a lot of progress so far in kind of automating the front end of our sales process, where we're doing demand creation all the time, spend a lot of money on demand creation. Leads come in, and you have to decide, how do you go engage that lead? And historically, a salesperson will field a lead, and they'll sit down and do some research on the company, and then maybe write a thoughtful email sequence so they can do some outreach, and perhaps they're even going to call them up. And we've been able to automate that entire process. So a lead comes in, we know the company, we can build APIs into our tools like Zoom Info, or even go out to search tools, completely profile the company, completely profile the customer, understand the unique nature of their role in their organization, auto generate that email sequence with a personalized, you know, well written value proposition that is unique to their industry and their role, and then spoon feed that along with a call script to the salesperson, right? And so, the front end of our sales process, I don't know, a salesperson takes an hour per lead maybe to put all that together in a thoughtful way. And we've just given them that hour back and can dramatically increase the throughput of our sales organization on the front end. In terms of marketing, people spend a lot of time on search engine optimization. The goal is to, how far can I take organic search before I have to start paying somebody to drive traffic to my website? And we found tools that will, given a list of keywords that you want to rank for, rewrite the copy in your website in perfect English prose, but in a way that the tool knows it is going to, through this generative AI model, rank higher in organic search. And we increased traffic to our website like 4x in a 2-month period, simply by leveraging this tool that allows you to rank much higher for the keywords that are important to you. I'd say for me, the most important thing was, in order to move kind of beyond dabbling, was we appointed somebody in our business as our AI czar, right? And their job is to become steeped in all the latest tools and technologies that are available, and then go to every single function and challenge them to leverage these to become 30% more productive. So I'd like to think that, we've made great strides, and kind of the next wave of innovation is not going to be augmenting our workforce, but deploying agents that will actually work alongside our employees, and operate as a software engineer, or operate as a support agent, as an example.
Yeah, no, those are amazing examples. So I want to highlight, I think, a couple of those. So I absolutely think that having someone who's the AI czar, right, or someone who is that owner is so critically important. I think that has been the missing component AI has been done in like all of these weird little silos, probably like how cloud was, early on. Remember that? It was
Yeah.
like this department used a credit card to sign up for something over here, and then someone else signed up for something over here, and the data was
Yeah, it
separate.
was BYOD, then it was BYOC for bring your own cloud, and now it's bring your own AI, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And without that centralized strategy, I don't think you're really getting all the benefits. And you're probably not moving as quick as you could be. And also I always get nervous too about like companies, are they really thinking about security and policy and things too, if it's just left a marketing department to go pump all of their marketing into some public AI tool that now who knows where that data went, all their
Yeah.
white papers are now who knows where, right? So I think I think you really hit the nail on the head. And then you also brought something up, which I thought's great that I wanted to dive into too, which is around agents. So
Yeah.
I think we are entering this transition where we're moving away from like this like prompting, like where we're just always like typing stuff in and maybe we get the right thing, we type it again, to, as you I think rightfully pointed out, agents that are operating autonomously in doing their own thing. And from your perspective, yeah, I'd love to get your view on what are some of you think the low hanging fruit opportunity for agents. I know you mentioned like support being one.
Yeah.
Have you thought about even like the technical agent, like something that you've trained with manuals from older products maybe that are still out
Yeah.
there in the market, and somebody needs help on a 10-year-old product that you might not be thinking about anymore, but they
Yeah.
can go get it quickly with an agent? Are you all thinking about that and agents? And maybe just spend a little more time telling me how you think about
Yeah.
the agents
100%.
helping.
We're Ruckus is a 20-year-old business now. So as you might imagine, we've got a wealth of data, and a lot of the workflows that are kind of human arbitrated today are institutional knowledge about where that data resides, and then being able to go and collect that data and connect the dots between that data to drive an outcome, right? And that's a workflow. Very labor intensive, prone to error, obviously. And because a lot of it is institutional knowledge, when that knowledge leaves your organization, you lose something very, very meaningful. And so the journey we're on now is deploying agents that can automate those workflows so that we free up knowledge workers for higher value work. And so, the way I think of this is we have spent years building user interfaces on top of structured and unstructured data to allow us as humans who have eyes and hands and ears to manipulate that data. And in the realm of agentic AI, those UIs are going to kind of disappear, right? And search is probably a good example of that, right? We've all been using Google search through google.com for many, many years. And, now as you evolve to tools like Gemini, you're not using a user interface per se. You're just querying the vast knowledge of the internet to get to an answer you want. And we can do something similar with enterprise data. One example is around how we identify and respond to RFPs, particularly public RFPs. These things are published. What we typically do is pay a service to tell us all the RFPs are out there, and then have humans sift through those RFPs to see which ones will be relevant for us, pull out the relevant RFPs, and then go to all of our enterprise data in order to respond to those proposals so that we can submit a competitive bid. Well, today we can deploy an agent that goes out and pulls all the public domain information around what projects are out there, collects those, given a series of rules and training, can identify those that will have a high propensity to buy our product, can help us understand and research the entire competitive landscape, and then can go to our internal knowledge bases and automate the response to those RFPs. And so, workflows that took weeks or months of multiple people working on have now been distilled down to seconds. And so when we think about deploying agentic AI, it really is identifying the lower value work that you can automate so that your knowledge workers can really focus on innovative areas of the business that are going to move the needle.
Yeah, I love those. I mean, I think those are spot on, perfect use cases. I mean, they make sense. And you're right. I mean, I can imagine having a human, and I've done this. I've responded to RFPs. I mean, I've
Yeah,
looked through, hundreds of pages, and then you're right. It's like, okay, I got to go into the knowledge base and find this obscure answer. Some of the questions in the
that's right.
RFPs, right? We've all seen those. Sort of like, oh my goodness, you got to really go dig to find the right answer. And I've spent hours and hours
Right.
researching for one question in an
That's
RFP
right.
because it's something obscure, right? And especially in a regulated industry. So I agree. I think, man, wow, what an efficiency engine that will be for the sales force. I mean, I think you hit it spot on. And maybe if you think through now, just like the running of your business, your product now, like if I'm shifting gears and I think about the product, like how do you view AI making the network itself just better, smarter, automated,
Yeah,
optimizing itself, right? Infrastructure that maybe, well, no, I'm not going to say it never goes down, but maybe goes down less or identifies
right.
problems on its own. I mean, how do you see AI playing a role like in just the network fabric of the future too?
Well, one of the big challenges that we have as a business and we have in our industry is every customer issue is reported the same way by the end user. And you can probably appreciate this because you're the CIO of your house. But every issue gets reported as the Wi-Fi is broken.
Mm,
Well, once you hear that the Wi-Fi is broken, that starts a very painful, expensive, and time-consuming process of finding out what's really wrong with the network. It's just that users are only experiencing Wi-Fi, so any network issue presents to them as the Wi-Fi is broken. And we've had partners, MSPs in our ecosystem that have told us, we used to have to roll trucks for issues. We used to have to roll trucks to a site to answer the question why the Wi-Fi is broken. And now, using products and technologies like Ruckus AI, we're able to do all of that remotely. The network is telling us there's a problem before the user calls us and describes the problem, and we've remediated it before there's ever any customer or user impact. And so the nature of networks is they generate an awful lot of data. And historically, the challenge has been processing that data, and a lot of kind of legacy tools were created and generated to help you visualize the data, but it still came down to a network engineer sifting through logs, sorting through different systems and different layers of the network to try to understand, well, okay, it seems like the Wi-Fi is okay. Do I have a DNS issue?
it's always
Have I
DNS.
Yeah, well, or have I exhausted my DHCP address pool? Did the user just forget their password, right? Is the internet actually down, right? The local Wi-Fi is fine, but you have a network outage. And so, leveraging all of the data that's generated by these networks, I think our journey started a lot like many other network companies, where we can use this data to identify anomalies before they turn into help desk tickets. It's a big value to any IT organization. From there, you can triage and prioritize in a network of any meaningful size. The help desk is usually understaffed, so prioritization becomes very important. Now we can automate the prioritization using machine learning and AI primitives. And then, through a recommendation engine, we can tell you what the most likely root cause of this issue is. So, based on the data we've collected, looks like the Wi-Fi is operating just fine, but you can't reach your DNS servers, right? As an example, which is a very common problem. The less common problems are things like VLAN mismatches. In a complex segmented network, identifying a VLAN mismatch on a port, you used to go port by port by
Yeah,
port
very major.
and have to inspect that. Now, using AI primitives, we'll just tell you you have a VLAN mismatch before the user ever even notices it. So that's kind of where we started. And I'd say the industry broadly is there if you've been investing in AI. What we're evolving toward, though, is intent-based AI. Understanding, what is the business intent of this buyer? And I can tell you, it differs pretty dramatically between somebody in a factory, somebody in a school, somebody operating a hotel, and that has implications on how you actually configure and operate the network. So now, if we can understand your business intent, we can automate the configuration and operation of the network to help you meet your business outcome versus what has historically been done, which is, you go into a command line or you go into a fancy network management UI and you make decisions around what is more important to me. Am I designing for coverage or am I designing for capacity? Right? Am I trying to restrict my cell size because I have 70,000 people in the stadium, or am I covering City Street in Manhattan and I want to maximize my coverage? Right? And that usually was a human thinking through, what does that mean in terms of how I deploy and configure RF in this environment? And now we can use that with agents to understand your intent and automate the configuration of the network. So I would say it's constantly evolving, but like any other industry, we're trying to make IT organizations more efficient and deliver the best possible experience to the end users on the network.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I can tell you're using AI like in every aspect of your business. I mean, you gave us the examples, the front end, right? Right from marketing
Yeah.
and outbound sales activities, you're already using it all the way back through literally designing and deploying networks. You're using it. So I love how you've already thought through. I can tell you're ahead of a lot of people that you've already thought through that. And
Again, if you're not, you're in trouble.
you're in trouble. Yeah, I agree. I agree. And one of my favorite like just real world use cases that I personally tinkered with is around, and it seems like, maybe it might not be as exciting, but the call center AI use case, when it's properly like extended all the way to the customer on the one end, that could be a completely non technical user, all the way through a customer support person, a technician on the other end that's already been trained with all the data of every product. So that when the customer, to your point, my Wi Fi is down, as
Right.
soon as they're interacting with the agent, the AI agent, it already, most of the time, already knows and it can tell them, right? It can stop a call from coming in. Oh, it's this. We already know we have all the data. We've been monitoring telemetry. We've already seen this. Or if it does require a technician, when that transfer takes place, it's very warm. The technician now already knows, right? Like
That's
this
right.
is probably what's going on. And I've just personally seen, like when I see these demos of it, I'm like, my gosh, this saves, I mean, a lot of calls coming to a center, but to your point, the workers, once they actually look at it, they've already been told what the most
Yeah.
likely outcome is, the problem is, how to fix it. It's the agent's working in the back end to fix it. And so I view that like that missing link between a user that thinks the Wi-Fi is down and
Yeah.
fixing the real problem is becoming very automated.
It's becoming automated. And I think, there's still always going to be need for user intervention for really complex technical scenarios. But when I look at the statistics in calls to our tax center, 40% of those are for very, very low value work. Like, I can't find my support entitlement, right? Or, um, I don't know how to configure this feature. There's no reason to have a human to intervene in that, right? We've got this 20-year knowledge base. We've got online communities that talk about our product and through the Hive kind of solve ruckus problems all the time. And if you train a model on that, you should be able to automate that lower value support work because I want to, of course, invest a lot more in my engineers that handle those complex customer scenarios that tend to be very tricky and time consuming. So I think there's already a lot of disruption happening in the call center space. Again, that's one that's going to impact every single industry, high tech or otherwise. And if you're not embracing that, then you're falling behind for sure.
Yeah, you are. I mean, the automation is key. I think for speed and decreasing calls. But another thing that I'd like you to maybe teach me a little bit about, because I would love to hear this from your point of view too, is about just like the accuracy of the work. Like, are you finding just like technicians are getting, they might not know, but maybe the AI is prompting them in a way, right, where they're getting an accurate fix more quickly? Are you seeing that? Like, are they just getting better trained, even as technicians or engineers are out there? Are they doing more accurate work?
Yeah, certainly. I think historically the workflow was an issue comes in to TAC, and the engineer certainly by the time it gets into escalation, is pulling from a lot of different data sources in order to get to the root cause of that issue. So, what are those data sources? Certainly, every other case we've ever seen in the entire 20-year history of our business, right? Reams and reams and reams of technical manuals,
Paper? Are
data
you training
sheets,
models with paper? Do you often
data
do that?
sheets, configuration guides,
PDFs and
you name it, right? Yeah. So historically, that escalation engineer was pouring through case history, pouring through, a knowledge base, pouring through a community to try to understand: have we ever seen this issue before? How did it get solved? How do I configure my way out of this problem? And today we've trained a model on all those knowledge bases. And why we haven't automated the engineer themselves per se, now that engineer is simply querying a model about the case at hand. And so I would say the highest usage we have of the models that we've built and the chatbots that we've created is in our support organization, because we've dramatically improved mean time to resolution for those products, because we've put all of the knowledge bases at their fingertips in a way that they can query through a prompt to quickly get to the root cause of their customer issue.
Mm, amazing. Yeah. I mean, that's the real world example I think we're all trying to get to, is solving that problem more quickly, more accurately, and yeah, freeing an engineer up to not just be doing a keyword search in a PDF all day. No, nobody
But
wants to do that.
it's really important that as you embark on this journey, you've got to have very strong support from your IT organization. So, we're doing a lot of this in a line of business, but we're touching a lot of different enterprise data sources. We're touching our corporate website infrastructure. And so you're introducing risk, right? You have to acknowledge you're introducing risk. And so simply using public domain tools or a personal subscription to one of the models really is not suitable in order to protect your company data, protect your customer data. And so, we've partnered and we've got very strong partners in our IT organization to help us remain on the bleeding edge. They'll help us evaluate tools. We work with our legal and compliance teams to understand, what can we actually train these models with? How do we sort of constrain the data to local models or a containerized version of the models that only our knowledge base is exposed to? And in doing so, we've been able to build these custom bots. And I think one of the things that has surprised me is you kind of want to think there's this Uber God bot out there that knows everything. But we've been a lot more successful training the sales bot, the RFP response
Mm.
bot, the TAC bot, right? And then training them with bespoke data. And of course, there's a Venn diagram there's overlap, but training these bots for a custom function, right? And then to the extent that we want an agent to automate an entire workflow, that agent now can leverage multiple different bots in order to be able to complete that automation framework. So um, it's a journey we're on. I would say probably the hardest thing is the models and agents and tools and technologies we were using 2 months ago are outdated, right? And we're constantly having to pivot. So, the models we trained 18 months ago are obsolete, and we've had to kind of start over. But there's been a lot of learning along the way, and I would say we are constantly evolving our strategy to try to stay ahead of the market.
Yeah, you're thinking about it the right way. And yeah, you're right. The exponential growth in the way these models think and react and how smart they are, right, is just truly wild to see, and it being at
Yeah,
Google, I mean, I really get to see it every day. Like, these models are getting better and better. And that right now, I think we're still in this era where there's this push pull between a model that is trained on everything, the just like
yeah,
it'll go write a PhD dissertation on any topic, but it's a little slower. And then
right,
there's, like we call it like a flash model that's a little bit smaller, but it will just peel off those
right.
highly trained relevant answers, right, really quickly. And so, there's like, okay, do I use the super mega smart slower model or the super fast model? I have a feeling, and I'm sure you know this, in a couple years, those will probably start to converge.
Converge, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
100%.
We'll figure out how to get a really smart model that's still basically instantaneous. Maybe I'll just ask you, Bart, one more question if I could. As you've
Please.
been deploying AI, my gosh, everywhere, front end, back end, front office, customer service, what's been the biggest challenge? Like as an executive, what's been the hardest part, I guess, of achieving those goals with AI?
Yeah, I'd say twofold. One we touched on. I guess both we touched on. The rapid pace of change. I think I'm always very paranoid that um, we're falling behind or we're not using the most modern tool or model, and investing in something and thinking you've solved a problem only to find that it's completely obsolete literally weeks or months later, right? And you have to kind of throw away that work and start over. I would say beyond that, the risk that you may be introducing through some of this, because we talked about bring your own AI, right? It's happening whether you like it or not. You can try to shut it down in an enterprise, but employees are going to circumvent it because it has incredible utility for them. And so thinking through, is my enterprise data being exposed? Is it being exposed to my competitors? Am I exposing any of my customer data? I think those are the two big challenges: is like keeping up with the pace and wanting to move real fast, but then also being very cognizant that you're introducing risk. And at the end of the day, business leaders are risk managers, and you have to think through balancing the speed and pace at which you want to move at, while protecting your business through that whole journey.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a big one. I mean, I think making sure you're still being protectful of your intellectual property, your customer data is critical, right? That just can never escape. That can't leak, and that is definitely, I think, one of the big ones. I'm glad you hit on that because that was something I see as well. So, anything else, Bart, you want to cover that I didn't talk about today before we drop?
This has been great for me, Brian. I think I love the opportunity to kind of get all my thoughts on this out. Right, I sometimes feel like I'm working in a very fragmented fashion, going from engineering to supply chain to sales and marketing. But you've almost helped me stitch all this together in my head in this hour we spent together. So really, really appreciate the opportunity.
No, no, I believe me, I appreciate it. And I love just hearing these real use cases because we often live in the ephemeral world sometimes, right? Where we're thinking about
Right.
art of the possible. But it's great hearing you talk about your salespeople being more effective and your engineers being more effective. And it's just great hearing a real world use case from an exec that's doing this, like really doing it, not just thinking about it. So thank you. I
Well,
appreciate it, Bart.
thank you as well. It's
All
been a
right.
lot of fun.
Thanks.